it did give us a glimpse into the stocks that he personally owns.
He's one of the most well-known billionaires in the world.
Because some of the stuff doesn't seem to correspond with Trump's personality.
But what he has in his investment portfolio might surprise you.
These aren't companies where he's really necessarily shooting for the moon here.
MarketBeat's Chris Markoch takes us into a list of 7 stocks owned by the president.
This is a solid stock, again, for investors that are just looking for set it and forget it stocks.
And why you might want to add them to your portfolio too. Let's dive in. All right, Chris, so glad to have you here to talk about this today. We talk so much about congressional trades on this channel, but now we have a chance to talk about the head honcho and what he's trading in the market. So let's talk about kind of overall trends that you noticed when you were looking at his list of stock ownership.
You know, when Donald Trump was candidate Trump in 2024, he has to put out a disclosure with the SEC. It's a federal election disclosure, and it details all of his different investments, but it did give us a glimpse into the stocks that he personally owns. And one of the things that I noticed about the list is how unremarkable the list is. And I'm not going to sit there and say it's unimpressive in terms of the dollar amount, but in terms of the companies that he owns, these aren't companies where he's really necessarily shooting for the moon here. These are just very solid companies that you would expect to see in a lot of different portfolios.
Okay, so nothing too flashy, a lot of strong and steady companies out there, kind of basic stocks that you would think of. What does that tell you about this stock list and about his investments?
Yeah, well, the one thing it might tell me is that Donald Trump's not making his own buying and selling decisions in stocks, because some of this stuff doesn't seem to correspond with Trump's personality. But given that, and that's a given, that he's probably not buying and selling his own stocks, I think what it just does tell you is it's a message to retail investors. Because if I look at many of the stocks that were on this list of Trump stocks, you'd see a lot of correlation to stocks that are considered Warren Buffett stocks. And so I think there's a message here for retail investors is you're looking for best-in-class companies that generate a lot of revenue, generate consistent earnings, in many cases pay a great dividend, and then you can kind of just set it and forget it.
A good strategy for retail investors to not forget about as we talk about all these buzzy stocks out there. Well, let's get started with Trump's list. You've got 7 stocks that you're highlighting.
Right. So the first one we're going to talk about is NVIDIA. There's a surprise. Donald Trump owns NVIDIA stock. And keep in mind, this was a list that came out in 2024. And the reason why I'm bringing up NVIDIA is because NVIDIA was in the tier of stocks in which this disclosure shows that he owns between $500,000 and $1 million. It didn't give a specific dollar amount or a specific number of shares. It just said he owns within a range of this dollar amount. And so obviously, NVIDIA is a great choice. It's a leader in the AI story. It might not be in the first inning anymore, but it's probably in the 3rd or 4th inning. NVIDIA's got some room to run here. It seems very sensible that this would be a stock that a lot of investors would want to be in.
And it's a stock that a lot of investors are in.
Yes.
And this isn't a part of your list, but I wanted to add a couple of freebie stocks from Trump's list as well that he owns a lot of, that same range, that $500,000 to $1 million ownership. And these two are also kind of no-brainer tech stocks that a lot of people own.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at Microsoft and Apple. And I mean, that's pretty much there. If you've got NVIDIA, if you've got Microsoft, and you've got Apple, you're talking about AI, you're talking about the cloud, you're talking about the iPhone. I mean, you've got pretty much a lot of the tech sector covered in just those 3 stocks. And it's curious that all 3 of those stocks are 3 of the stocks that Trump has the highest amount of ownership in.
Those 3 picks are kind of lumped into our first pick on this list. Let's move on to the second company that Trump owns in the stock market.
Right. So the second pick, and again, here I would caution again, this is a list that came out in 2024. And Tesla's that stock. According to the list that I saw, Trump owns between $50,000 and $100,000 in Tesla stock as of, I think this was as of summer of 2024. It may seem a little bit inconsistent with Trump's stance on electric vehicles, which is, again, probably another reason why you might say he's not making these trades himself. But it also suggests that he's not viewing Tesla as just a car company, because if you view Tesla as just a car company, that's very different than if you view it as a company that's going to be involved in autonomous driving. If you look at it as a company that's involved in energy storage, then you have a very different outlook on the company. And I believe that's probably the investment thesis that Trump has in having Tesla in his portfolio.
Well, let's move on to the rest of this list. These next five picks have a lot in common, and they're also companies that the president doesn't have a lot of ownership in.
The next stocks we're going to talk about, all we know is that he owns at least $15,000 in. We don't know how high that gets. We would assume it's probably less than 50,000, but it's still in that range. And one of the things, Bridget, the common thread through all of these stocks that we can go through fairly quickly is these are all category leaders who generate consistent revenue and earnings. And I think in all the cases, they all pay a dividend. And that's something that you're looking at that shows that Trump's trying to get a balance of growth and income in his portfolio. And these are all stocks that fit that description and fit that strategy very well. The first is Chevron. We know that Donald Trump has an affinity for the oil and gas industry. He wants to see America be energy independent. Chevron makes this list. Interestingly enough, he also owns shares of ExxonMobil, so he's playing both of the top oil and gas companies. He owns them both. One of the reasons why I think Chevron's appealing is because it's the seventh largest integrated energy company. It has operations across the world, including in the coveted Permian Basin. Chevron stock has been doing not a whole lot of anything over the last couple of years in terms of the stock price. And that's been because they're trying to merge with Hess. The merger has been held up because of arbitration that they're in with Exxon over some of Hess's Guyana assets. This is all expected to be wrapped up within the year. And a lot of analysts are saying once this wraps up, you're going to see Chevron's free cash flow, which is already quite substantial, it's going to increase significantly by 2027. And that's going to drive the stock price much higher than where it is right now. And when you consider that Chevron pays a great dividend and its PE ratio right now shows it is certainly not overvalued, Chevron seems like there's many good reasons why Trump may own Chevron.
Yeah, Chevron is a solid energy pick. And if you're interested in investing in energy, check out our free report on MarketBeat.com called 7 Energy Stocks to Buy and Hold Forever, much like the president is doing with this company. You can scan the QR code or click the link in the description of this video to get that free report on MarketBeat.com right now. All right, let's move on to the fourth stock pick in your list.
The fourth stock pick in my list is defense contractors, Lockheed Martin. Ticker symbols LMT. Again, not a very difficult company to associate with President Trump. He's advocating peace through strength. That's a posture that's familiar with that of several of his predecessors. One of the things about Lockheed Martin is they're very involved. I believe they have about 10% of the Pentagon's budget goes to Lockheed Martin. And I'm not really that concerned, even though there's going to be some trimming in the Defense Department and the Defense Department's moving to some new age weapons and other things. I'm not that concerned about Lockheed Martin losing their share of that budget. And again, as long as they don't lose that share of the budget, you're looking at a consistent revenue and earnings producer with a nice dividend to boot.
Yeah, again, this pick is from 2024 on
Right.
Trump's list. Lockheed Martin has had some recent developments in just the last couple of weeks, too.
Right. They've had an analyst downgrade. When I look at the downgrade, I see it's not necessarily that they're downgrading the stock. They're lowering their price targets. But the price targets are still higher than where they are now. So again, maybe not as much growth as investors would like to see, but again, you're still getting a company that's raised their dividend for 22 years and they're rewarding shareholders in a lot of different ways.
All right, let's move on to the next company on the list.
So this company and the next company sort of fit in the same bucket. And that goes along with the idea of if we are building the country's infrastructure, these are two companies that you're going to want to watch. The first is Caterpillar. So Caterpillar stock shot up really high in 2022, right after Congress passed the Infrastructure Act. And that's obvious. Caterpillar is a maker of heavy equipment. Companies need this. You're going to need that to do the roads, the bridges, all of those sorts of projects are going to be heavily reliant on Caterpillar's equipment. I don't see that changing. You're seeing commitments by many companies to onshore their operations. That's going to require construction. You're seeing data centers being built. That's going to require construction. So I think Caterpillar is an interesting choice right now, and one that you could certainly understand why it would be part of Trump's portfolio.
So we have Caterpillar as one of those infrastructure investments. What's the next company on the list that's also tied to infrastructure buildouts?
If you've got all these projects that are going to be popping up all over America, you need to get the products to those areas. And that's where Union Pacific comes in. It's a railroad holding company. It transports a variety of products and commodities primarily through the western half of the United States. But that's important because that includes Arizona, it includes Silicon Valley, and that's where some of these projects are popping up. Uh, the company has a almost a fortress style balance sheet. It's got a healthy cash position between $1 billion and $3 billion at any given time. And that supports a really safe dividend that right now has had a 3-year growth rate of about 7%. And that cash flow is also important because that should be able to help Union Pacific mitigate any impacts that they might have from this uncertain tariff policy that's in place right now.
Yeah, Union Pacific, a company that's been around for a long time.
Right.
The last pick on your list, also a company that's been around for a while, and
Right.
one very much so tied to this president.
Depending on your point of view, this is either the funniest or the most horrifying pick in this list, and that's McDonald's. Now, people will remember when Trump was president the first time that he hosted I think it was a national championship team, and he hosted them at the White House, and the menu was all McDonald's food, and it was hilarious in some ways. And it just shows though that Trump has an affinity for McDonald's food, which everybody knows. And so it wasn't surprising to me that he owns the stock. And in fact, it's one of his largest holdings. To me, it kind of mirrors what you hear about Warren Buffett, who's rarely shown without a can of Coca-Cola nearby, and he's one of Coca-Cola's biggest shareholders. So it makes sense that Donald Trump is supporting a stock in which he owns stock in that company. So he's supporting the company in that way. But the question is McDonald's a good investment? And I really believe it is. They took their licks a little bit in 2023 as interest rates got high and inflation got high, and consumers felt like there wasn't a lot of value in their menu. They've since come back. They've got the $5 meal deal. That seems to be bringing customers back. And right now the stock's getting back to trading near that all-time high. And again, this is a company that pays a solid dividend, annualized 3-year growth of about 8%, 49 consecutive years of increases. This is a solid stock again for investors that are just looking for set it and forget it stocks.
That is definitely a set it and forget it company. Thank you again, Chris, for walking us through this list of 7 stocks that Donald Trump owns. And let us know if you think you want to own some of these too, or if you already do. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this list. And if you're interested in what our leaders are trading in the stock market, be sure to check out our other congressional trading videos as well, and how you can look up what members of Congress are trading right on marketbeat.com. Thanks again for watching, everyone. And as always, happy investing.